So today we'll be studying about the skull. So today it will be an introductory class. So the whole skull will be covered in multiple classes. Okay. So there will be 5-6 classes regarding the skull, but today we'll be studying only the introductory part. So basically the whole skull comprises of 22 bones in total. Okay. Now the skull is divided into two parts. One is your cranial skeleton, another one is your facial skeleton. So this is your cranial skeleton. This whole part is your cranial skeleton. And this anterior face part is your facial skeleton. Okay. The cranial skeleton is also known as neurocranium and the facial skeleton is known as viscerocranium. Okay. And all of these bones are like joined together with one another by sutural joints. Okay, suture joints, these are immobile joints. So here between these bones there are sutures. These are also joints, but these are called as sutures. Here also sutures. Only movable joint in the total skull is your mandible. So the mandible is a movable joint. So it's a temporomandibular joint and as well as a synovial joint. So it's a synovial joint, temporomandibular joint because it is joining with the temporal bone as well as the mandible bone. So now coming to the part of the skull, as I have already mentioned that one of them is cranial skeleton and the other one is your facial skeleton. Now the cranial skeleton is further divided into your cranial vault. So this is the cranial vault, a dome-shaped structure which is like covering the skull, I mean the brain like this. Okay, so this is the cranial vault. And this cranial vault is joined with this cranial base. This is the base. So this is base of the skull. This whole part is base of the skull. So together they form the cranial skeleton. This total structure together they form the cranial skeleton. And the face is in the front, that is your facial skeleton. Okay. Now coming to the individual bones. So in cranial skeleton there are 8 bones in total. Some of them are paired, some are unpaired. So the paired bones are your parietal bone and temporal bone. So here you can see these two bones are your parietal bones. These two bones are your parietal bones. And here there is one temporal bone and on the other side there is another temporal bone. So these are paired bones, that is they are present in pairs. And the unpaired bones are your occipital bone, frontal bone, sphenoid bone, ethmoid bone. These are your sphenoid and ethmoid will be present interiorly. Okay, so these are your unpaired bones. And in the facial skeleton, only two bones are unpaired. Obviously, the vomer is unpaired. This vomer is unpaired. This is a single bone. Mandible. Sorry, the mandible is unpaired. That is a single bone, and vomer is present here, which is unpaired. And rest all the bones are paired. Maxilla is present in 2. Zygomatic bone is 2 in number. Everything is 2 in number only. So this thing I have already mentioned that the upper dome part is called cranial vault as well as calvaria or brain box. It is attached to the skull base below. The calvaria along with the skull base is known as cranial skeleton or cranium. The lower anterior part is known as your facial skeleton. Now this is the neurocranium or the cranial skeleton and in front you have the facial skeleton. Now the joints of the skull. So the skull, I have already said that all these bones are joined together by sutures and in the suture there is sutural ligament. Okay. Except on the mandible there is, it is connected by synovial temporomandibular joint which is a freely movable joint. Now coming to the functions of skull. So one function of the skull is that it protects the brain. So do you agree that the skull also like allows to take food as well as to inhale air? Is it a function of skull? It is a function of skull. Basically the nasal bones are present here, so it helps in inspiration, and the mouth, that is the mandible as well as the upper part is present here, so you take food through our mouth. That is why this is also a function. And it allows many structures to enter into the brain through these foramens as well as to come out through this brain, through the brain, through this foramen. See, so these are the various parts of the skull, the exterior view mainly. So the parietal bone I have already showed. This is your parietal bone. In the front you have the frontal bone. Sometimes in the frontal bone you will see another suture, that is your metopic suture. and posteriorly you have the occipital bone. It will be serrated margins like this, serrations will be there. Now coming to the anatomical position, the skull is like hold it like a way that the inferior part of the orbit or the lower margin of the orbit and the external auditory canal should be in the same line, and the line should pass through the upper part of this external auditory canal. So this green line should be horizontal. The green line should pass through the lower margin of your eyeball or your eye socket and through the upper margin of your ear canal. So this is your ear canal. So it should pass through the upper margin. So this is the anatomical position of the skull. This is known as Frankfurt's line. There is another line, that is your Reed's baseline, which same like passes through the lower border of your orbit and through the midpoint of the external auditory canal, not through the upper part. The green line is, that is the Frankfurt's line, is passing through the upper part of your external auditory canal or ear canal, but the red line is passing in between the ear canal. Both the sides same, it will be same. Like this is the basic criteria for anatomical position of the skull. Okay. Now coming to the exterior of the skull. So the skull, usually during our time we used to study the individual bones, but right now we divide the skull into normas. Okay. So norma, one is your superior aspect, that is your norma verticalis. So individual classes will be taken for all these normas. So the superior part is your norma verticalis, anteriorly is your norma frontalis, posteriorly is your norma occipitalis, at the base is your norma basalis, and there is on the lateral side norma lateralis. These are the 5 exterior aspects of the skull. So as you can see in the norma verticalis, that is the superior view of the skull, you can see on either side are the parietal bones joined by this sagittal suture, and the frontal bone and these two parietal bones are joined together by coronal suture. So this is coronal section, this is sagittal section. Similarly, there is sagittal suture and coronal suture. Now there is one point, that is bregma, that is present at the junction of your coronal suture and your sagittal suture. So this is your bregma. This is present at the junction of this coronal suture and your sagittal suture. And on the posterior side, you can see this lambdoid suture, that is forming the joint between the occipital bone and either parietal bones, parietal bones on either side through this lambdoid suture. Now this sagittal suture and two lambdoid suture together form a lambda sign. It forms a lambda-like sign. So this lambda sign, so this is known as lambda. Okay. So this is lambda, this is bregma. And in the frontal bone, in some of the individual, you will see another suture, that is your metopic suture. It is not always present. This is known as metopic suture. So these are joined between these bones. Now this is the posterior view or the occipitalis, norma occipitalis. Here you can again see the occipital bone, this occipital bone, then this parietal bone you can again see. Okay. Then nuchal lines here. So this is the norma frontalis. Here you can see the frontal prominence, then nasion, glabella present here. So this is the norma frontalis. This is the norma lateralis. Here you will see terion. Terion is a junction between your frontal bone, parietal bone and your temporal bone. So this is very important because during your extradural hemorrhage, that is in case of any road traffic accident, this terion gives protection to one important artery, that is your middle meningeal artery. Okay. So this middle meningeal artery gets ruptured, that is why hemorrhage occur in the brain. Okay, that is why this terion is very important. Now this is the basalis part, that is the norma basalis. Here you can see multiple foramens. There is foramen rotundum, ovale, spinosum, lacerum, jugular foramen, then this big foramen magnum. All this, all these foramen or openings allows passage of many structures. For example, the foramen ovale allows meningeal artery to pass, accessory meningeal nerve to pass. These things will be covered in multiple classes. So that's all from your skull part.